Live. The fast continues. Because it's just more like super maximum tech fails today. So just a little sorry, I'm not out of view. So just a little announcement before I start, in case anybody is also following other classes with me who is watching now. I posted on Instagram. I've actually cancelled for today the 6:30 p.m. Feldenkrais online class, just to give me some time to reset. So I'm live streaming on somebody else's computer, and I hope I will get my own computer back later today. Yeah, so no 6:30 p.m. Feldenkrais class tonight, but there's another one on Wednesday. So join for Feldenkrais on Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. And yeah, what else? Okay, so thank you. Week four of lockdown. Week 4 of, I think, is it? Week 4 of my daily practice. So thank you for joining. I've got my just in case alarm at 4:40 again. And anybody who is not used to joining this practice and is coming along for the first time, welcome. And just to say that this is really my practice, and I'll be doing things in my way, and you're really welcome to do things in your way and follow along only with what feels good. So really take what I'm doing as a structure around which you can do your own thing. And I'll talk just to make that clear that it's me doing my thing rather than teaching, because of course I can't see you, so I'm not teaching directly. So to make that clear, I do the whole thing in the first person. So I'll be talking through my own experience, and in doing so, hopefully guide you through an experience for yourself. Push it more hardcore when you want to, take it right back when you want to, rest whenever you want to. It's really completely up to you. Go where you want with it. So I'm going to start lying down. And just coming to the ground with my arms and legs long. I've spent a lot of time in this particular spot, in this room now. I've spent a lot of time in this room now. So just coming back to the ground, having a little stretch. And beginning to transition into this space of practice, this space of letting go, of observing and not judging. Noticing how I'm making contact with the ground, taking my attention into my senses. So that I can experience whatever I experience and be aware of it at the same time. Noticing where I hold tension, where I am able to let go gradually. And I just started a movement of looking up and down a little bit, so I'm rubbing the back of my head against the ground. And I just see what's possible. How do I do that without pushing at all? And then I let go and I just rest. And I do this little test of rolling my head side to side, or rather, I have the intention of rolling my head side to side, but I don't push. I just see what's possible without pushing past any little grain of resistance. And in case anybody's watching the camera, I need to say today for me that means almost nothing is possible. I can feel a little bit, like a millimeter each way, but really it won't be visible from the outside. And I'm not going to push the rolling over my head. I'm just seeing what's possible without the push, without any effort. And I just accept that for now. And I bend both my knees and I stand both my feet. And I just listen to how that changes the contact of my body with the ground. And I do any little wriggling and settling that I need to do just to make myself more comfortable. And I'm not pushing. All of the wriggling and settling is just softening, kind of like laying out the body. I'm not plastering out the body against the floor. I'm not forcing a stretch. I'm just doing very small adjustments, slightly reorganizing according to my own comfort. Just to make myself comfortable, lying on my back with my knees bent and my feet standing. For me, that means just trying to soften a little bit through the back of the body, let go of my belly. Small, soft wriggles, and then I can rest comfortably. And then I just lengthen both legs and I see how I feel now with my legs long, just after that little wriggle. And notice my head is now looking a different way. So the back of my neck is lengthened and the back of my chin is tucked. So I'm just scanning in order to notice difference. I come back to seeing what rolling the head is like. I've got more potential rolling of the head available to me now. Just from that little soft reworking of my alignment. I really did not expect my head to roll already, but just follow that test, have the intention and see what's possible, and it turns out my head rolls better now. And I rest again. And then I stand my feet again. And I come back to looking a little up and down. So I can feel the back of my head rubbing against the ground as I look up and down with my eyes and my face. And I start to slow it right down. I'm practicing this awareness where I can have the awareness of the action that I'm doing, but also a more global awareness of my body. So that as well as noticing the action I'm doing, I can pick up on other movements and other sensations elsewhere in the body. This sort of soft focus, catch-all type of focus, type of awareness. I'm soft in my jaw. And I slowly look up and down. The back of my neck arches as I look up. The back of my neck lengthens as I look down. And going softly and slowly, I make the movement bigger. And as I make the movement bigger, I notice what effect it has on the rest of my body. And as I look up, I feel my chest sinking a little. The back of my body comes into a greater contact with the ground. And as I look down, I feel it's a bit harder for me to do that without tension and so without effort, and so I just have to take a few goes at it. Looking up, my chest sinks, and that's easy for me and that's clear. Looking down, my chest starts to lift, but I also feel I start to hold tension in my hip on one side, in my back, my belly. So I'm just having a few goes. There we go. I changed the alignment of one leg, and now I look down a little bit easier with a little bit less tension, but it's still a little bit trickier for me. I look down, my chest lifts a little, and I look up and my chest sinks. And I've done it a few times now, so I can make it smoother. I can adjust my arms on the ground as I need to, adjust my feet as I need to, just to make the movement smoother. And I'm going to continue, but with my legs long. So both my legs are long, I'm looking up and I'm looking down, and as I look up I feel my chest sink. As I look down I feel my chest lift. My chest sinks as I look up, my chest lifts as I look down. And I'm trying to do that as softly as possible without letting tension creep elsewhere. For me it tends to be around the hip joints, so trying to let go and around my hip joints. I change the rhythm, the pace, the speed and size of the movement. And then I just rest. And I'm going to do the same basic movement of the spine, but I'm going to drive it from a different center. So rather than my chest lifting and lowering because my head is looking up and down, I'm going to intentionally lift and lower slightly. Yeah, when I say lift, I mean lift my chest towards my head, towards my chin, and then sink my chest away from my chin. I'm going to put my hands on my upper rib cage at the front, just above the breast, to help me feel what's it like to move those high ribs, pushing them down and then lifting them up. As my ribs press down, my back presses into the ground a little bit more. I feel the back of my waistline rounding as my front ribs lift up. I feel my lower back arch a little bit more. I feel the waistline come away from the floor a little bit more. And my chin gets closer to my chest. So as my chest lifts and lowers, I'm trying to let my head and neck be passive, so that my head is still moving, but not because I'm intentionally moving it, but just because I'm moving my chest. And if I move my chest, that means I'm moving my whole rib cage. If I move my whole rib cage, that means I'm moving my whole spine. And my head is implicated passively in the movement. And I have a soft focus in my eyes. And I have a soft jaw. And I'm just using my hands in any way to help me feel the lifting of the chest and the pushing down of the chest. And then I rest. And I feel how my contact to the ground changes. I revisit rolling the head. rest again. And then I bend my knees and I stand my feet. And I place my hands on my low belly, so my thumbs are underneath my belly button and my fingers are just at the top of my pubic bone. And I start to roll my pelvis up and down. And I use my hands to help me feel how I can roll my pelvis. And as I roll my pelvis, my low belly helps the movement. As I stick my bottom out a little bit, rolling my weight down towards my tailbone, I feel my bottom sticking out a little, my lower back arches, and as I tuck my tailbone underneath a little bit, rolling the weight to the top of the sacrum, and my belly drops in towards the front of the spine, and my lower back comes into contact with the ground. And I play with that slowly a few times, trying to let my belly be soft. I'm looking for a movement that doesn't push. I'm using my hands to help me feel what my belly and my pelvis is doing. I'm softening my breathing, and I just change again the size of the movement, the pace. I take my feet a little wider and I knock my knees in together so my knees are touching, and I keep going. And I just see what does that do. And then my feet are more or less, they're not parallel, but they're sort of even, more or less, and my knees are knocked in. And then I just leave the rolling of the pelvis and I take my knees side to side, but keeping my knees in contact all the time. So it's a small movement because as I take my knees side to side, one knee just drops in, keeping in contact with the other leg the whole time, and then the other knee drops in, keeping in contact with the other leg the whole time. I don't want my feet too wide. I'm not going to let my knee come all the way down to the floor. I'm not going for a big internal rotation of the hip. I'm just feeling my knees roll and rub against each other, and I'm letting that shift the weight in the back of my pelvis. So as I roll my knees staying in contact all the time, I listen to the tension in my hip joints, try to let that go, try to let any tension in my low belly go. And again, I use my hands on my pelvis, my thighs, my belly to just help me feel where can I soften. Where is it easier for my musculature to let go? Can I keep my chest soft at the same time? Can I keep my jaw soft at the same time? And I just take a rest, with my arms long. And then I leave my arms long and I leave my feet a little wide and my knees together and touching. And I come back to rolling my pelvis up and down. And I see how that feels now that I've done that little rolling of my hips and knees and pelvis. I've done a little shuffle of my back against the ground so that I'm comfy, slightly realigned myself just according to my own comfort. And as I roll my pelvis up and down now, I feel a little bit clearer that my pelvis pushes and pulls my spine. And therefore my head is again nodding. As I stick my bottom out, my chin is pulled down to my chest, and as I tuck my tailbone underneath, my chin looks up, away from my chest, and the front of my throat opens. I roll the pelvis, and I let the rolling of the pelvis push and pull the spine. And I change the speed. I do a little rock up and down. I move my back and ribs on the ground just according to my own comfort. This is a really soft reset. And then the rest. And then I'm going to just come back to rolling my knees a little bit. My feet slightly roll on the floor, and then I just stay so that one leg is in line with the hip in parallel and the other knee is knocked in completely. So my knees are still touching, but I now have my left knee in line with the hip joint in a parallel position, and my right knee knocked in internal rotation so that my right knee is actually touching inside the left knee. And I'm rolled a little bit. I can feel that the weight has rolled a little bit onto the back of the left side of my pelvis. And I just stay there, and I come back to rolling the pelvis up and down. So in this position, I'm rolling my pelvis up and down, but I've got more weight on the left side. And I'm looking to try and release in my hip joints as much as I can. What does it do? What happens in my hips, in my spine? What happens to the contact of my body with the floor? When I do this rolling up and down of the pelvis that I've been doing so far, but now with the weight rolled a little to the left side of the pelvis, with my right knee knocked in, just resting against the inside edge of the left knee. And I let go of any tension in my chest and my belly. And I play with the speed, pace and size of the movement. And I pause there. And I just bring my feet back to standing again, and I see how I feel. So my knees aren't knocked in anymore. My knees are apart in line with my hips and feet. And I just see how I feel now. I definitely feel that the weight is still rolled over onto the side it was. So even though I think I've come back, even though my intention is to come back to centre, I can feel that now my weight is rolled a bit more over to my left. I roll my pelvis up and down here with my feet and knees in line with my hips. And I see how that feels. Very different left and right hip, very different left and right side of the pelvis I have, even though my intention is to be equal. I just notice that. And then I do the same thing of taking my knees together and then taking them side to side a little. Really important that I'm keeping the knees in contact all the time, so it's a very small, gentle movement. Allows my hips to soften and melt. Then I stay over on the second side, so my left knee is now knocked in and leaning, resting against the inside of the right knee. And my right knee, on the other hand, is standing in line with the foot and hip. And I stay there, feeling that this has rolled the weight to the right side of my pelvis. I just adjust my comfort on the floor, and then I roll my pelvis up and down. How does that work? How does this side compare? I'm just seeing what's possible. This side is really different to the other side for me. On this side, it's harder for me to tuck my tailbone underneath softly and open up my lower back. I just explore and notice. So my right foot is standing, my right knee is in line with my right hip and foot. I'm trying to roll up and down on the back of my pelvis, but with the weight rolled towards the right side of the pelvis all the time because my left knee is knocked in and leaning against the right. This is an exploration of hip joints and spine. I find a possibility, a little letting go, so that now that I've done it a few times softly, just exploring different ways of doing it, I find the movement starts to pass a little bit better up to my head. So even though I'm now on the right side of the pelvis a little, my pelvis now still pushes and pulls my head, and my head is going up and down as my pelvis goes up and down. And I stop. And I come back and I stand my both feet so that my feet, knees and hips are in line. I pause. Feel the weight again is sort of remained over on the right a little. And I come back to rolling the pelvis up and down. Wow, I have a really different sensation of the bony structure in the back of my pelvis now. And I just rest. I lengthen my legs and I rest. And always I first of all just allow myself to notice what I notice. And the first thing for me was just a real sense of space in the front of the hips when I lengthened my legs. And I want to keep that sense of space. So I'm going to not do any abdominal exercises here, because if I do that I'm likely to shorten. I know I'll be shortening my psoas again habitually, so I'm just going to leave it and I'm going to roll over onto my belly. Which way do I want to go? Go this way. I just roll over onto my belly and rest on my belly. And I turn my head the other way and rest the other way. And then I just start a little exploration with my fingers and my hands. By the end of last week, I spent so much time on my phone with this new online life. I'm really getting problems through my finger all the way up to my head, through my shoulder. So I'm trying to do a little bit of softening of my hands, spreading out of my hands, rolling of my fingertips, rolling of my knuckles. I just very, very softly want to let the sort of chronic use, give a little bit of variety to the chronic use of my hands on my phone, which I'm doing so much. So I make fists and I roll my fists on the ground a little bit with my elbows up in the air. There's a nice little opening of the front of my chest, and I play with how pushing my fists into the floor affects my shoulders. I lift my head off the floor and I feel that I push my fists into the ground, and that can just move my shoulders. My elbows can go in different directions. I'm trying to stay really soft in the belly and the hips, and I'm looking anywhere I want, and then I just start to take my arms anywhere I want. I let go of the fist. I'm just exploring different surfaces of fingers, hands, arms, the inside of the arm, the back of the hand, the back of the wrist. All of this is a little exploration. I want to do it really softly. because it's easy to use the fingers and increase tension, and I'm trying to use fingers, use texture. Got this lovely blanket that I love on the floor, so using texture and play of the hands and the arms on the ground to soften, to release tension, to explore how the hands connecting to the floor connects through my arm to my shoulder, to my neck, to my ribs. So how can I let the movement of my hands move my ribs? I stand my hands on the floor underneath my shoulders somewhere. I just play with pushing one hand at a time into the floor so that it rolls me. And I feel that pushing my hand into the floor pushes my shoulder away from the floor. And I can do that in so many different sizes. I play with different size movement. All the time my belly is out. My belly is against the ground. Maybe one hand on the floor, maybe one elbow on the floor. Exploring how the hand connects to the elbow, to the shoulder, to the chest, to the ribs. And if it's connecting to the ribs, it connects to the pelvis, through the spine. So I start just playing with the spine. I'm really focusing on shifting my weight around on my hands and my elbows, my lower arms, the back of my hands, the back of my wrists. I get my hands right under my chest with my fingertips curled up into a little fist, right under my chest. And I have my forehead on the floor and I just rest here. I feel how that creates a little bit more space for my belly, for my breathing, a little bit of restorative compression for my chest. And I look up and forwards, and I roll my shoulders back gently, and then I come down again. And I look up and forwards, and I roll my shoulders back gently, and I open my arms a little bit wider, and then I come down again. And I just do that many times. I look up and down. And I use my forearms on the floor to help support me again. And I play with how big a movement I want, how small a movement I want. So just like when I was lying on my back, I play with what happens when I lift and lower my head, when I lift and lower my chin.